into all of that. So first and foremost, thank you so much for taking a minute out. I'm looking forward to delving into your world as a writer and everything that's going on.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah,
And thank
you
you for doing this. It seems like you have a really wide sort of selection of people with different stories. And I mean, that's really your service to the world.
it's a huge net. I'm just dropping it over the planet, so it's good. It's fun. It's absolutely fun. And there's
Can
so
I
many,
ask you, am
yeah,
I allowed to ask you how you
please.
started with that? I know you're doing the jazz, but this is quite a different thing.
Yeah, what I've done historically is I've reached out to authors that have just fascinated me. And because I've done the jazz, it's kind of worked itself in. And then I just kind of started branching out and it just made sense. And I've just done it more and more. And I've just discovered that I really love it. There's so many people in the world that are doing so many great things. And as much as the news media makes it seem like we're all in such despairingly different places, we really aren't. We're actually a lot more aligned with how we want to live our lives and how we want to create and do things. So I'm fascinated into delving into those stories.
Right. And I think reading is definitely one way for every one of us to feel that we're not alone. You
Yeah.
know, picking up a book and you're essentially getting into somebody else's head,
Yep.
the author,
Mhm.
indirectly, but you're also, hanging with the characters and following the twists and turns of an adventure. And I think for children in particular, it really worries me when I look at literacy rates. And I think, reading is a way back to having kids feel like they're part of something else that's going, aside from what's going on in their immediate vicinity. It can be a wonderful escape and a learning tool, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's wonderful. And I'm curious, one of the things that really did affect, I think, literacy rates and kids and just in general was living through that pandemic. So how
Yeah.
did you get through that COVID period and how has it influenced the way that you do things now?
Well, actually, it was a it was a real game changer for me. I'm a little bit different, maybe, to some of your audience members because I was living in Finland then as well,
Yeah.
and the Finns had a little. We weren't like the Swedes. We had a lockdown. The
Yeah.
Swedes famously didn't. They're our neighboring country, but there was there was a bit more freedom. We were allowed to go out for walks. I mean, people were out and about walking and going to the supermarket and doing things, maybe a bit more than in the US, at least in some states. But I was anyway sitting on the sofa pretty much the first morning of the lockdown, and my business, my consulting business, pretty much tanked. And this is the story of so many entrepreneurs. And I had already been working for a number of years on the side with my concepts and building these children's stories and working with kids on the side as a volunteer, trying to figure out how to teach climate and climate science to kids. So I was sitting on the sofa and I thought, I've got no money, no business now. Is the universe trying to tell me something? Why don't I just get going? And I just opened up my laptop, page one, and now I've got four books. And I don't know if I would have dived in that same way that I did if it hadn't been for the pandemic. So I mean, we all know what a terrible, terrible thing it was for so many people. But for me, actually, it was what got me kickstarted and going onto this new path.
And I think it did it for a lot of people. I mean, I think it was, I think it's valid for people to say that it was a time of pivoting and flourishing and doing things. It doesn't take away from the woe. I just feel a lot of buyer's remorse when people say, I don't want to say that it was a good thing, but it really was. I mean, and we all got a chance to pause and recalibrate. I sometimes feel like we're in some kind of like biblical-ish story where we're kind of left behind, kind of that whole idea of there was kind of a rapture, so to speak, and we're all trying to figure out with this life that we have, what do we really want to do? How do we want to live it out?
Right. And a lot of people had a chance really to take pause. And by the way, since the topic of my writing is the environment, it was really quite outstanding the way that carbon emissions were capped.
Yeah.
I mean, there was 2 years where we saw a real downward spike in CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. So that was something. But yeah, biblical, yes. And by the way, the stories I'm writing, okay, there's no religion or culture. I'm looking at climate change and I'm focusing my characters in a global eco school. So everybody is from everywhere. And these are like the top I've got coined a new word, ecodemic. So the top ecodemics from around the world, 9 to 12 year olds. Um, and what was I saying? We're talking about, yeah. So what I've tried to do is create these kind of, in many ways, biblical, like in the upcoming novel, there's a Leviathan style monster. It's this, I'm making it sound a bit more crazy than it is, because this got hard science in it as well as these fantastical elements. But this, I don't call it a Leviathan, but it's actually birthed from plastic in the sea. So I'm raising awareness of plastic pollution. But all of the books have, I don't know, can I jump in and talk about the
Sure.
books?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, so the what I wanted to do when I got started was figure out a way to teach about extreme weather events without sort of just talking about wildfire and having these scary floods and the kind of thing that we're seeing every day. I mean, in Spain yesterday, they had flash flooding, 95 people killed, homes ruined, cars gone. That was an example of extreme weather, the kind of extreme weather that we're hearing more and more about. Uh, that was 1 year's worth of rain in 8 hours in one small village in Spain. So how do you teach about that to kids in a way that would be entertaining, but at the same time a little bit scary, but still safe? So I came up with the idea of this class of monster. So I'm the myth maker here. This is my own new mythology. The monsters, I was living in Greece when I first conceived of them. And so I took the Greek word anthropos for meaning mankind, and I took the word hog, no offense to pigs, sorry, but meaning over greed, over consumption, and I made the word anthrog. And this class of monsters are called anthrogs, and they have all kinds of different classes, weather warriors and storm lords. My first book is called Eye of the Storm Lord, and that's a sort of demon class monster storm. So I found a way to present metaphorically these kinds of extreme weather attacks in the form of monsters. You didn't ask me about that, but I just kind of jumped in with
That's
it.
fine. That's fine. I'm curious, what was your favorite book when you were young?
Well, that was a long time ago when I was young, and we didn't, so it was pre-Harry Potter. But I used to, don't laugh, but I used to love the Enid Blyton books,
Yeah.
the famous fives,
Yeah.
and they were criticized. Do people know Enid Blyton, do you think? It's a bit like
Probably.
Hardy Boys. You know
Yeah.
Hardy Boys.
Yeah.
So the famous five, this group of kids, it's the same idea that I have in my books now, where you have different personality types all working together, challenges and twists and turns, and a fair amount of danger. And
Yeah.
I used to love closing myself away and just getting into these books where kids, I mean, you barely see the grown-ups. It's kids and they're solving big problems and they're doing it fearlessly. Well, not always fearlessly, but even when they're afraid, they keep going. And that's kind of the way now I've structured this series. It's the Peter Blue series, and even though Peter Blue is my main protagonist, there are some really strong girls, and it's very diverse, and it's a good bunch of kids.
So did you always dream about being a writer? Take me back to your childhood. What were the seeds that were planted that cultivated you into making these stories and these worlds?
Okay, well, I was always a reader, definitely, and that was really encouraged. We always got big loads of books for Christmas. The C.S. Lewis.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember those well. But there was always books piling in, and my father is an academic with two PhDs. He has floor-to-ceiling books all through the house, and my mother was a teacher, and she taught me to read before I went to school. So I was always a reader, and but actually, I used to love sport. So I dreamed that I was going to be a famous gymnast. I wanted to be so for the older people in your audience, I wanted to be Olga Korbut or Nadia Comaneci. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but I got too tall, so
right.
I became a rugby player. In New Zealand, that's our national sport.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, quite a difference.
yeah,
But yeah, I loved sport, but of course I ended up, yeah, I ended up studying literature. So you could say that that was the destiny. And I ended up studying medieval poetry of all things and going really deep into words. And yeah, so I'm a literary comparatist by training. But straight after I graduated, I headed off on the first plane out of New Zealand. You know, it's the bottom of the world. It's as far down south as you can go, and I headed off to Europe, to Italy for a few years, and then to Asia. And I ended up getting into business because, you know, that's what you do if you're traveling and I mean, you certainly don't think I might, at that age, that I might write a book. And no, you know, I had
yeah.
to find work. And then I ended up, actually, I did begin in Japan teaching English in big corporations. So I was teaching Japanese businessmen in the 90s English, you know, business English. And then what happened was I got picked up by the company and sort of taken in Mitsubishi. I spent some time there and got taken into communications. So I became a corporate person. And then when I met my now finished husband in Tokyo, he ended up taking me north to Finland, where I joined Nokia at a very propitious time. Actually, Nokia was on the rise in 2000, stock price doubling every week for a while. Cell phone users, you know, Nokia that was
Sure.
in the back in the day was one of the very first big, great global handset manufacturers. You know, we went from one handset in 1990 to 1 billion in 2000, and Nokia produced 30 to 40% of those from
Yeah.
memory. Uh, so
That's amazing. So
yeah,
who's been an inspiration? Who's been a hero for you to take on writing and to do what you've done and to accomplish what you've accomplished?
if I think so, an inspiration in terms of other writers.
Well, no, just in general, just somebody that's inspired you to be who you are.
Well, first of all, that when you said in terms of other writers, J.K. Rowling jumped into my head,
Sure.
and she's younger than me, and she's obviously been a mind-blowing, unprecedented global success in every sense of the word, and she still is, obviously, still is. And I remember reading after I had started my series, I remember reading that J.K. Rowling had modeled Harry Potter around the boy Arthur. And she had read the same book that I read when I was young, written in 1932 by T.H. White. And in America, for your audiences, you'll probably know The Once and Future King, which Disney produced
Yeah.
with the boy Arthur and Merlin. It's charming. And I think Disney did a cartoon version of that. But there is a big, long book which follows the whole story of Arthur from boyhood, learning with Merlin, all the way through to his deathbed at least. And so I wanted my boy protagonist to be very much like a boy Arthur, but I wanted him to be for the environment. So there's this old myth that King Arthur, after Camelot and after all the glory days, that he lay down in a hollow hill and promised he didn't die. He promised to wake when the world would need him most. And I thought, I kind of grabbed onto that and said, boy, does the world need another Arthur right now.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the climate crisis, and I'm looking at the apathy that we all feel and the sense of powerlessness and also hopelessness. And I thought, I want a story for young kids. I want it to be entertaining, but I want it to bring hope. And I
Yeah.
want it to also bring kids back to nature. So I took actually the same character, this boy Arthur, that J.K. Rowling drew upon for creating Harry Potter, and I've made him into my hero, Peter Blue, who's this boy, sort of boy king. He doesn't know it yet. So yeah, that's what I did. So she was inspiring, and maybe there's still space out there in the middle grade novel world for another
Yeah.
voice
For
and
sure.
another hero like that.
So of all of these things that you've done with your life, you've been geographically and you started south and north and all these things that you've accomplished. What are you the proudest of? What stands out?
What am I the proud? Oh, that's a hard nut from left field. Well, why don't I mean, okay, why don't I just say it's my books now?
Yeah,
I mean, I haven't, I'm selling globally and things are going all right. I'm building an audience, but I haven't become a bestseller. However, I can still say it's the thing that I'm most proud of because it's the thing that I've really done myself. So throughout my career, I've had some highlights. I've also worked in Washington, D.C. on a big environmental business project. I've done things, but it's always been someone else's project. So it's been something that I'm contributing to for for the success of a big corporation or someone else's big dream. So these books are now, I can safely say, as my big dream. Come back to writing from my early my academic background, and now I think now I'm on the fourth book, and I really feel like I've got a good formula. Formula is the wrong word, but I've got a good concept that can go places. So I'm
yeah,
proud of that.
for sure. So
Yeah.
are you hopeful? I mean, from an environmental standpoint, with what humans are doing, I know there's a helplessness, there's a lot that's going on that's bad, but are you ultimately hopeful that we'll somehow figure this out and have a better future for our kids?
I'm okay. Here's what I'm going to say. If you really look at the numbers, we're totally fried when it comes to climate change. However, of course, we're hopeful. I mean, we're human beings and
Yeah,
I've got two teenage daughters. We've all got children in our life and and we all believe in the future and we believe in humanity deep down, whatever we say. So I've developed this theory that I can very quickly share with you. So when it comes to climate change, I don't know if your audience is very familiar with, or maybe you even have climate deniers. I don't know. But if we look at the science, I think most people in your audience have understood that the big increase in global average global temperatures came after the 1880s. When we had this industrial age kind of really started getting into full burning coal, and we're getting excited about gas and oil, and we're doing great things. I mean, a huge time of learning and development. So the climate crisis came really slowly, and the hockey stick is what is used mostly when people talk about the climate crisis. So 1,000 years, we got the flat sort of edge of the stick, and then the sudden spike after the 1880s, and in the 1990s and the 2000s, we've had this incredible record-breaking temperature surge. So we've got this hockey stick and it's going. So I've decided that the way that I'm going to hope for the solution to climate change is that we're going to have the same kind of hockey stick approach in the way we tackle it.
yeah,
So we're in this flat zone now where it's kind of helpless. We've had Paris, we've set our Paris targets as a world. We've set targets for 2030. We're not really close to getting them, but we've got the targets there. Countries of the world came together and said they want to be net zero by 2050. I'm going to believe that we can get there.
yeah,
And if you think back to the pandemic and the way the whole world scrambled and worked together, and in 1 year we got we got a vaccine.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's because people were dying around us. We
yeah,
saw, I mean, sorry to be so, harsh, but we
right.
saw that supply chains were just dissolving, businesses were going under, and people, yes, they were dying
Yeah,
around us.
yeah,
So people scrambled. And I feel like maybe we're getting close to that tipping point in a hockey stick, what I could call a hockey stick of hope,
yeah,
where we suddenly realize this is real. And so now we're going to fix it.
yeah,
And by the way,
absolutely.
the US has really led the way in a lot of very high profile technologies that
Yeah.
if we can just um, level up on the funding, we can see huge results. So yes, I'm going to be hopeful, and my stories are going to be hopeful because you can't talk to kids
Yeah.
and say, it's all over. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm
So
excited about.
Yeah, no, and I believe that, and I think there are a lot of things that are moving in the right direction. So that's the perfect lead in. If anyone wants to go out and get your books, they want to reach out to you, learn more about you, where's the best place to go?
Probably Amazon. That's the global marketplace. I'm there in all the English speaking markets now. So it's the Peter Blue series, and there's a third book coming out now, which is called Knights Unite. Knights with the K,
Sure.
Knights
Yeah.
Unite, and uh, but Laurel Colless or laurelcollis.com. So that's my name with no space.com. The website that'll direct you also to other marketplaces. But yeah, please do,
Yeah.
or just download it on Kindle or go to your library
Okay.
and ask the library to get it
All
because
right.
I really want to get it in front of audiences and try to entertain your kids and get things rocking.
Absolutely. And we're doing our part. Laurel, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time, the hope you're putting out there, and best of luck with everything with the new release.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks. It
Thank
was
you.
great.
I appreciate it.